Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to my review of Season 4, Episode 22 of Lucha Underground. And this was the conclusion to Ultima Lucha Cuatro. This was the final part. Last week we had the first part. Now tonight was the last part. And this tonight's conclusion is also the season finale for Lucha Underground. And it possibly might be the series finale. Because who knows if El Rey is going to renew the show for a 5th season, which I hope they do. So the conclusion to Ultima Lucha Cuatro, this was a great show. This was an amazing show. I was very into the matches tonight. All of them were really good, were really great, and they were enjoyable. They were crazy. So let's get on with the review. Of course, the episode opened up with recaps that took place in the previous episodes. Then we had a scene where after the recap we had a scene where Johnny Mundo was playing air guitar. With the gauntlet. If you saw the end of last week's episode, you all know with Mundo, he ended up, having the gauntlet. And, he had the gauntlet on, and him and Taya were there. And, Mundo says to Taya, if I get sacrificed to the gods tonight, I just want you to know that I love you. And so Mundo ends up walking off. And Ricky Mundo's talking doll, Rosa, was speaking to Taya. You remember after the match last week where Taya ended up beating Ricky Mundo. She ended up taking, Ricky's doll. And, Rosa complimented Taya, saying that she was the perfect woman and the perfect host, in quotes. And it looked like the doll's spirit might have went into Taya's body. Not sure about that, but that's what it pretty much looked like. And then the scene ended. And then we went to the temple. Melissa Santos ended up introducing us, saying welcome to Ultima Lucha Cuatro. And then the first match got underway. The first match, it was El Dragon Azteca Jr. versus Fenix in a 2-out-of-3 falls match. This was a good match. The show went to commercial when Fenix made his entrance. And then when the show came back from commercial, the match got underway. And this was a back-and-forth match between El Dragon Azteca Jr. and Fenix. Fenix ended up getting the first fall, the first win. He ended up hitting a black fire driver on El Dragon Azteca Jr. And it looked like, as he was pinning El Dragon Azteca, Fenix was staring at Melissa Santos. And, we all know, the relationship between Fenix and Melissa Santos, before, he was bought back. And Fenix has never lost a match at Ultima Lucha. He's undefeated. And as the second fall began, which it happened after the commercial break, we heard Matt Striker saying that there would be no disqualifications and or countouts. And we saw Fenix end up bringing weapons into the ring. Fenix took control, but El Dragon Azteca Jr. Made a comeback. He won the fall, so it was 1-1 between El Dragon Azteca Jr. and Fenix. After El Dragon Azteca Jr. made the second fall, Antonio Cueto ended up coming out of his office, and he announces that the final fall will be a Falls Count Anywhere match. And after he made that announcement, we just saw Fenix then, throw a chair, at El Dragon Azteca Jr.'s head. And the show went to another commercial break. This match, had a lot of commercials, had a lot of commercial breaks. Then, when the show came back from commercial, we saw, the final fall begin. Fenix ended up, stacking up piles of chairs on El Dragon Azteca. He was trying to, El Dragon Azteca was trying to recover. Fenix ended up, trying to suplex El Dragon Azteca from, the ring to the outside. But, El Dragon Azteca ended up fighting off Fenix. And then we saw, the both of them, they end up brawling outside. They end up setting weapons. And, at one point, Fenix ended up hitting a suplex on El Dragon Azteca outside on the floor, which looked really cool. And they began brawling outside, of the ring again. They went into the bleachers. And this was really awesome. El Dragon Azteca Jr. ended up pinning a Hurricanrana onto Fenix through a table that was on the floor, which was awesome looking. It was very awesome. Very great. The crowd really was, into it. And Fenix then ended up, attempted to hit a double stomp on El Dragon Azteca through the table. But he ended up botching that because the table didn't end up breaking. And the two went back into the ring. El Dragon Azteca ended up hitting a roll on Fenix, off the ropes, and, went through a table. And, looked like El Dragon Azteca was, about to, end the match, put away Fenix, with the chair. And Melissa Santos, begs El Dragon Azteca, not to do it. And, she was pretty much distracting El Dragon Azteca, begging him not to hit Fenix with the chair. And that led to Fenix taking control. He ended up hitting El Dragon Azteca with the chair. Melissa was on the ring apron. And Melissa begged for the match to be stopped. And Fenix ended up hitting a few more moves. Fenix ended up getting the win. So Fenix ends up winning the match. She's still undefeated at Ultima Lucha. Then we saw after the match, Melissa ended up just, walking out of the temple. She didn't announce, Fenix's win, so she just ended up walking out. So, but all in all, it was a good match. It was a very enjoyable match. It was a back and forth match between El Dragon Azteca and Fenix. These two just gave everything, they had. And it put an end to the rivalry between the both of them. So, then when, then the show went to a commercial. Then when it came back, we had Antonio Cueto. He ended up addressing the audience. He informs the audience that Melissa Santos had left the temple, which, the crowd ended up booing. And Antonio then announced that he made and I quote, a blockbuster deal with an incredible talent. And so he introduces that talent. And it is revealed that the guest ring announcer for now is Shaul Guerrero. If you all don't know who Shaul Guerrero is, she is the daughter to the late great Eddie Guerrero. She's married to Aiden English. So it was really awesome, to see her. And, the crowd really liked it. I've seen, her matches in the indies, watched videos of them on YouTube. Very entertaining. And so she was revealed to be the guest ring announcer for the rest of the show after Melissa ended up walking out. And she was about to introduce the next match when she then gets interrupted by Famous B. And he ends up saying to her that he is the only guest ring announcer that the fans want to see, which the fans booed the hell out of him. And Famous B, he came into the ring and he demanded Shaw to leave the ring while offering her his business card. And he then claimed that, he had no idea who she was or who her family was. I mean, how could you not know the Guerrero family, Famous B? And then we had Shaw go, "Excuse me?" And, she didn't do it, like how her mother does it. Her mother is, of course, Vicky Guerrero, where, Vicky Guerrero had that ear-shattering, "Excuse me!" Which made our ears fucking bleed when she was, whenever she did that. Whenever she was, in WWE. But, Shaw did that. She did, that "excuse me." But, just from that, had a little bit of Vicky Guerrero in there, but not, full-blown screaming like, Vicky did. And she then said, she had then told Famous B that, her family was Lucha Libre. And she named all, the members of her family, from Chavo Guerrero Sr. to Chavo Guerrero Jr., Vicky Guerrero, of course, her mother, and her father, the late, great Eddie Guerrero, which Eddie's name, when she mentioned Eddie's name, it got the biggest pop from the crowd, which was awesome. And she then insults Famous B, and she ends up saying, "Oh, maybe the B stands for bitch." And then everybody started chanting, "Famous bitch, famous bitch." It was funny, though. So it looked like the two, Famous B and Shaw were going to fight. And Chavo Guerrero ended up coming out. He ended up coming into the ring. Both Chavo and Shaw ended up, throwing a punch to Famous B. Shaw then ended up hitting the, Eddie's famous Three Amigos, which is famous from Eddie. She ended up, hitting the Three Amigos on Famous B. Chavo then, after, she did the Three Amigos, Chavo ended up following up, ended up hitting a frog splash on Famous B, in honor of Eddie, because that was Eddie's signature finisher, the frog splash. And then after that, we saw Chavo and Shaw end up tossing Famous B out of the ring. And then, the show went to a commercial after that. But it was amazing. It was great, seeing Shaw there and, Chavo, come out. Seeing Shaw do Eddie's, Three Amigos. It was really great. It was awesome. And the crowd really loved it. So, it was a great moment. So, sorry about that, but after that, after the Shaw, and Chavo and Famous B segment, we went to the next match, which happened after the commercial. It was the death match with Mil Muertes versus the Mack, and this was a good match. This was a really great match, very brutal, very bloody. And, it was great. We saw Mil Muertes end up bringing the coffin out to the ring, for the match. In the opening moments of the match, it was back and forth between Muertes and the Mack. The Mack ended up hitting a Tope con Giro onto Mil Muertes outside. And we saw Mil Muertes end up bringing in another coffin to ringside, during the match. The Mack ended up opening one of the ended up opening one of the coffins, and it revealed that one of the coffins had weapons in it, and there was, you know, an axe in there, there was a block in there, and you know, there was a I think an ice chipper in there, and you know, the weapons end up being brought into the ring. Looked like, you know, Mil Muertes was going to use the axe on the Mack, but, you know, they end up you know, reversing it. So Mil Muertes, he ended up using I think it was the ice chipper, and he ended up using it on the Mack's head, which busted the Mack open. And then we saw later on the Mack brought in a trash can. It was a rusted trash can, and he ended up hitting, you know, a Shane McMahon. He pulled a Shane McMahon. He ended up hitting the coast to coast drop kick onto Muertes, as what Shane McMahon does. Because, you know, Mack ended up setting up, you know, one of the trash cans in the corner, had Muertes there, and you know, he just ended up hitting the other coast to coast onto Muertes in the corner. The trash can was set up there, and then, you know, we saw the Mack opened up, you know, was trying to rip open Muertes' mask, and he ended up busting Muertes open. And you know, then we had the Mack getting the win. He ended up hitting a stunner on Muertes. Muertes didn't even go down, so Mack ended up hitting a second stunner to Muertes. Muertes, you know, didn't even go down for that. And so the Mack ended up winning the match. He got the brick, and he smashed it over Muertes' head. The brick broke. So, and then he followed it up. I forgot what he said, but he's like, "Oh yeah, something." He was like, "Oh, motherfucker," and then you know, he's like, "Hasta la vista, motherfucker," and then he ended up stunning Mil Muertes for the win. So the Mack ends up winning the match. Then you had, after it, the Mack ended up dragging Muertes. He ended up putting him into one of the coffins. And we saw, what was really cool was the Mack ended up celebrating, you know, the victory by drinking beers, like, you know, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Because, you know, he had the beers there. He ended up pouring the beer onto Muertes in the coffin. Ended up, you know, doing the things like Austin does with the beer, where he hits both of the cans and then drinks it like that. So you can tell that the Mack got inspired by Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know, with the Mack hitting the stunner and then, you know, doing that, you know, with the beers. So, but all in all, it was a good match. It was a great match between the both of them. Very bloody, very brutal, and it was entertaining. A little bit, you know, I was a little hyped for the match. You know, as I was watching it. So then we had, you know, before this match got underway, Antonio Cueto ended up, you know, was on the balcony. Johnny Mundo ends up coming into the ring. You know, he yells at Johnny for having the gauntlet. And so then we had Matanza ends up entering the temple wearing a ancient Aztec headdress, which had, you know, like a skull on there. And it looked cool. You know, it was a good little attire for Matanza. And so the show went to commercial. Then when the show came back, it was, you know, the Sacrifice to the Gods match. It was Johnny Mundo versus Matanza. And this was a good match. This was a very good match. Another good match. Antonio Cueto ended up watching the match. And the match started off with Mundo using the gauntlet to overpower Matanza to take him down. And later on, Matanza ended up ripping off the gauntlet off of Mundo's hand. He threw it outside. It landed on the steps. As you come down to the ring. And then we just saw Mundo trying to use his advantage to get the better of Matanza, because Matanza is a tall guy. And Matanza then overpowered Mundo with a few suplexes. Mundo was able to make a comeback later on, but he was cut off by Matanza. He then escaped Matanza to get back the gauntlet. But he's trying to put the gauntlet back on, but Matanza was there. Matanza prevented Mundo from putting the gauntlet back on. And then we saw Matanza end up just throwing the gauntlet on top of one of the entranceways, and it led to Mundo trying to go around the temple to try and recover the gauntlet. And so Mundo eventually he climbed to the top of the freezer to get the gauntlet, and it was recovered as Matanza was behind him. Matanza then threw Mundo as they were up on top of the freezer. Matanza ended up throwing Mundo through the roof of the entranceway. As the luchadores would make their way down to the ring. And it was crazy though. It was crazy how Matanza then just threw Mundo through the roof of the entranceway. And what it looked like was, Matanza won the match. But Mundo emerged from the entranceway. He ended up putting back on the gauntlet. And the action went back into the ring. And, we saw Matanza come up with the chair. Mundo then just, with the gauntlet, just punched the chair. And Matanza ended up, going down, the stairs. And Mundo was then punching Matanza with the gauntlet, several times, and looked like that Matanza was scared, now that Mundo had the gauntlet back on him, and got the win. Mundo got the win. He ended up hitting a punch from the top. With the gauntlet on him, and knocked down Matanza. Mundo ended up getting the win, and so Johnny Mundo ends up winning the match, and he's not sacrificed to the gods. So, but this was a good match. This was a good match, a very enjoyable match between Mundo and Matanza. And then we had after the commercial. When Lucha Underground came back from commercial, we saw Mundo was walking backstage. He then gets approached by Aerostar. Aerostar ends up telling Mundo that the gauntlet, wasn't helping him. It was only just destroying Mundo. And Aerostar tells Mundo, a god would inhabit his body. And so Mundo ended up handing the gauntlet back to Aerostar. And Aerostar ended up telling Mundo that, he was a good man. And Mundo told him, he was not a good man. And so that was that. We had that scene backstage. And then we had the main event, which was the Cieo Mideo match for Lucha Underground Championship. It was Marty the Moth Martinez versus Pentagon Dark. And, the match got underway when Lucha Underground came back from commercial. And right as the match got started, Pentagon just took, control early advantage of the match, after, attacking, Marty. And during all this, we saw Marty was, busted open. He was bleeding like crazy. And this match, this was an amazing match. This was a good match between the both of them. Another very brutal, bloody match. And so Pentagon then ended up, throwing several, weapons into the ring. He was dominating the match until, Marty ended up making the comeback. Marty then tried to, take off Pentagon's, mask, and he ended up stabbing Pentagon because Marty went under the ring. He had his, his Aztec Pride, lunchbox there. He ended up opening it up, ends up chewing on beef jerky, and then he takes out a fork, which he used before. He used the fork before. Sorry about that, but I was saying, Marty used that fork before. And so he holded up the fork. He ended up stabbing Pentagon with the fork. And it led to Pentagon, bleeding. And, the action spilled, out of the ring. They were on the floor again. Pentagon ended up hitting the Mexican Destroyer on Marty. After he jumped off the commentary table, which was cool. And like I said, just as the match was going on, Marty's face was pouring blood. It was all over his face. Very iconic image of Marty's face, bleeding like hell throughout this match. And Marty then ended up bringing in a can of gasoline into the ring, and he poured it all over Pentagon. And what it looked like was, he was about to set, Pentagon on fire because he had the lighter in his hand. And Pentagon ended up getting up. He ended up kicking the lighter out of Marty's hand, and we saw Pentagon end up hip tossing, Marty out of the ring. And he went through a table that was set up there. And the two brawled outside. Pentagon, this was really crazy. Pentagon ended up throwing Marty into glass that was set up there. So Marty just ran fast through the glass there, shattered. And the crowd really liked that. It was, crowd really popped for that. And then at the end of the match, Pentagon ended up setting up, a bunch of chairs in the ring. Pentagon and Marty were in the ring. Pentagon then won the match. He ended up hitting a package pile driver to Marty through the chairs. Went for the pin, and there's your winner. Pentagon Dark wins the match, wins back the Lucha Underground Championship. So Marty's reign was very short. So, but all in all, it was a good match. It was a another brutal match that that was bloody, and it was done well. It was a good match. And then you had, after the match, Pentagon was going to break Marty's arm, and Reclusa comes in. Chelsea, aka Chelsea Green, comes in. Reclusa starts attacking Pentagon. Vampiro, who's on commentary, with Matt Striker, all the time, for all the episodes. Vampiro ends up coming in, makes the save. And then we got, Vampiro and Pentagon in the ring. Vampiro ended up presenting the Lucha Underground Championship to Pentagon. And, after that happened, then Vampiro ends up attacking Pentagon. And all of a sudden, this guy comes out, and he ends up hitting Pentagon with the chair. And this guy looks like Pentagon a little bit. And so Vampiro then gets on the mic and he says, Pentagon, meet my master. And so Vampiro's master then ends up hitting a shooting star press onto Pentagon outside of the ring. And then we had we had the master, Vampiro's master, end up hitting another shooting star sky twister onto Pentagon. And so out comes Jake Strong. He enters the temple, and Jake Strong ends up entering the ring. And this is where I was right and I was wrong at the same time. I was wrong. This is where I was wrong. I said that if the show comes back for season 5, Jake Strong should exchange the Gift of the Gods Championship for the Lucha Underground Championship. And challenge whoever won the match, whether it be Pentagon or Martinez. That I was wrong about, because they did it tonight. They did it here at Ultima Lucha Cuatro. And this is where I was right, where I said Jake Strong was going to come out. He was going to exchange his Gift of the Gods title for the Lucha Underground title. And he was going to take on whoever. And he was going to win the Lucha Underground Championship. And so that's... So I was right about this, but I was wrong about them, hopefully doing it, if they ever, come back for season 5. So Jake Strong then came out. He entered the ring. He exchanged his Gift of Gods title for a Lucha Underground Championship match. And so we had the match, Pentagon versus Jake Strong for a Lucha Underground Championship. This was a short match. The match just, was just Jake Strong putting the ankle lock on Pentagon Dark. Jake Strong, held on to the ankle lock on Pentagon for, a few moments. And, the referee ended up stopping the match because Pentagon couldn't respawn. And so Jake Strong is, your Lucha Underground champion, and the fans, the fans that were there were chanting bullshit, and so Jake Strong held on to the Lucha Underground championship. So, but yeah, it was short. It was short though. And then after that, we had a few scenes possibly setting up for season 5. We saw Aerostar, King Cuerno, and El Dragon Azteca Jr. Were they were shown somewhere, and they needed to get rid of the gauntlet. And we see Matanza walking somewhere. So we see Black Lotus end up returning with the gauntlet in her hands, saying that she knew that El Dragon Azteca Sr. didn't kill her parents. And so then she possibly went on to possibly have killed Matanza. And so El Dragon Azteca appeared, and he ends up telling Black Lotus that her parents' death has been avenged. And then we saw Jake Strong then attacked El Dragon Azteca, and he ends up taking the gauntlet. So now Jake Strong has the gauntlet now. So this is gonna be crazy if they come back for season 5. So yeah, so Jake Strong now has the gauntlet. And then we go to Johnny Mundo ends up meeting up with Taya. She was in the locker room to celebrate Mundo's win. Taya then tells him she's not his wife anymore. Before, you know, he ends up, and then she ends up attacking Mundo. And so after she attacks Mundo, she declares that, you know, she was God. So possibly, you know, that doll spirit might have, you know, went into Taya's body and, you know, possessed her. Who knows? That's my opinion. And so we see Jake Strong. After that, we see Jake Strong. He's in a limo with Antonio in there. And we find out, I was surprised at this and I was happy. And, you know, I got excited about this. We see Wade Barrett inside there. You know, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. Yes, that Wade Barrett inside the limo. That's fucking awesome. So glad that Lucha Underground, you know, signed, you know, Wade Barrett. And they end up all telling Antonio that his son, you know, was a good host. And it's now time for them to take over the world. And so after that, we go back to a year ago, where Antonio ended up stealing Dario's key. Aerostar comes and he places the amulet over the neck of Dario, and the amulet brings Dario back to life. And the season ended on a cliffhanger. It's said to be continued on there. So going into season 5, if they ever do a season 5, this is going to be big. This is going to be interesting going into season 5 if they ever, you know, get renewed. You know, we got Wade Barrett. We have Jake Strong with the gauntlet now. Dario Cueto back. You know, coming back to life. So this is going to be interesting heading into season 5. If we ever get, you know, if the show ever gets renewed. So, but yeah, all this, you know, hyped me up for next season. So, but all in all, this was an amazing show. This was an amazing conclusion to Ultima Lucha Cuatro, in my opinion. The matches were all really good. 2 matches were brutal and bloody, you know, with Martinez and Pentagon, and the Mack and Mil Muertes. This show was awesome. This was a good conclusion and a good season finale. You know, even though this season was short, though. So, yeah, so anyways, that's it for my review of Season 4, Episode 22 of Lucha Underground, the conclusion to Ultima Lucha Cuatro. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Thank you all for watching. And be sure to give this video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe. And until the next video, I'll see you all later.